Welcome, everyone, to a very late and very exhausted episode of the MMA Vivisection for UFC Fight Night Mexico City, Pettis versus Moreno. I'm Zane Simon, joined by Victor Rodriguez here. As I've noted earlier, if you follow me on Twitter, Conor Rivas has fallen under the spell of a dark wizard this week, and so until he solves his current magic-based conundrum, fights off his demons, literal demons, not figurative demons, Vic is stepping up to do the show for us. So, Vic, thank you for joining us for this card on short notice and all. Stepping up, saving everything.
Yeah, I think we should be a little more honest with the audience. I mean, Conor isn't really sick. The thing is that he's probably the one who snitched on Trump and caused this whole domino effect with the FBI. But hey, listen, it is what it is.
That's right. ICE is coming to detain Conor for several years against without a lawyer. So he'll reemerge from in an Alabama prison 5 years from now, once they've determined he's actually a U.S. citizen.
Oh God. Oh, I can't even laugh at that. That's really fucked up.
I know. Anyway, on that note, let's talk about Mexico City. That's my bridge to.
It's masterful segue. Yeah, sure. Fuck it. Let's go.
Masterful segue. So we're starting out the night with a lightweight bout: Alvaro Herrera versus Jordan Rinaldi. Vic, what are your thoughts on this fight?
Yeah, well, first off, starting with Rinaldi, who has, for some reason, I've always had the impression that he had been fighting in Bellator, but he never did. He's a guy who's been kicking around all over the place on the East Coast, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, ended up in RFA, and then got called up as a short notice replacement to fight Abel Trujillo, of all people. Ended up fighting to replace Carlos Diego Ferreira, I think he had failed a drug test at the time. Ended up losing by decision, hung in tough. There wasn't really, he wasn't ready for that fight, and that's perfectly fine. He's 29 years old. He's got that one UFC performance under his belt, and gritty, tough wrestle boxer. He's got some submission chops. He's going to be taking on a guy in Alvaro Herrera who is deceptively strong with his striking. He does some training over at Jackson Winklejohn, and is currently 1-1 in the UFC proper, although he was on The Ultimate Fighter, one of the Latin America seasons. I think it was the second one that they did.
Yeah.
Ended up knocking out Vernon Ramos with just an absolute kill shot, losing by submission in a subsequent attempt to against Vicente Luque at the Dos Anjos versus Alvarez card back in July last year. Thing here is Herrera's really good at setting off flurries. He's really good at, just sort of once he closes the distance, get 1, 2, 3, 4 punches in. Other than that, his game is a little more sporadic. He won't be shooting in for too many takedowns, but his takedown defense is pretty good. His submission attempts, he'll take what he can get, but he's not really very dynamic when it comes to opening those opportunities for that to happen. Whereas Rinaldi is going to be much more of the chain wrestler, which is not a problem. I mean, it plays to his strengths, and a much more composed and cleaner striker of the two. I just don't think he's got the kind of power that'll really hurt Herrera too badly unless he gets super careless. So probably going to go with Rinaldi on this one because of the ability to win rounds and just how that sort of thing goes. And I think he's just more consistent with that.
Yeah, my memory of Rinaldi is he's kind of a wooden but functional kickboxer who he gets his kickboxing is a little disconnected from his wrestling, so he tends to shoot from way outside and then chain wrestle his way in to the ground. But he's a pretty good chain wrestler, pretty scrappy grappler, decent there. And I think the biggest reason I'm leaning towards him here against Herrera is honestly all down to speed. Herrera is powerful, but he's also slow.
Yeah, he's very foot slow.
And just hand slow too. Like he's swinging hard and those punches will hurt, but it's kind of, he's kind of he's your Latino Cal Pendred out there.
No, this guy actually connects, number one. And number two, he actually hurts people. So, I mean,
True, okay, fair. But still, you know what I mean. It's just
I know
like,
what I mean. No, you're totally
kind
right.
of this big monolith moving in slow motion. And I believe this is his lightweight debut.
I think so, yeah.
I'm not sure that that's going to serve him any better, being like slow at welterweight and then moving down to lightweight. Maybe dropping the weight will like speed him up a little, but my guess is that Rinaldi is just going to be a little too quick to get in and out of the pocket, a little too quick to shoot in and catch him off guard, swinging wide, and be able to out wrestle him and outwork him for a decision win. So maybe even a submission. But I'm taking Jordan Rinaldi. Not a lot of confidence. Both these guys have dropped multiple fights to random opponents outside the UFC. And, you know, Rinaldi's been knocked out before. He's been decisioned. He's been submitted. And Herrera has been submitted. He's been knocked out. So both guys have ways to lose. I just trust Rinaldi's speed and diversity just a little bit more in this fight. Judges here actually have Rinaldi as a pretty reasonable favorite. He is coming in, opened at minus 245, which is shocking to me. Jordan Rinaldi opening that wide on anyone. And adjusted up to minus 228 and is slowly slid to minus 222. And then Herrera opened at plus 175 and has been up and down, went as high as plus 188 and is now back down to plus 179. Honestly, this is just one of those, like, this is a fight to me that should be like Rinaldi at minus 100, Herrera at plus 100. And the fact that the odds started out as wide as they are is like, that's why they're as wide as they are now. Like, there's no reason anybody should be betting on this fight. It should just be kind of weird and trashy where Herrera could connect with something huge and knock Rinaldi out, and Rinaldi's otherwise unlikely to, or is more likely to outwork Herrera. But, you know, both guys have been finished multiple ways. So we're both picking Herrera there, or Rinaldi there, though.
Yeah.
That brings us to a flyweight bout, unbeaten flyweight bout, Joseph Morales, Roberto Sanchez. And this is one of those fights where I was really excited looking at tape on the, like, getting ready to look at tape. I was going to be like, yeah, 2 unbeaten flyweights ready for some new blood. And then I watched the little tape and I'm like, I don't know. This is going to be kind of close and sloppy. Like, I think Morales is probably, I'm picking Morales here. And the big reason I'm picking him is that I think he's the better grappler. And I don't think Sanchez can stop himself from grappling. Like, Sanchez is almost certainly the better striker of the two, but he just kind of marches straight ahead, throwing wild flurries and getting himself off balance, and then is very happy to actively engage in a grappling battle. And Morales, he'll give up top position. He can be out-wrestled, but in his fights, it's much more like him hitting a sweep, and then once he gets top position, he's really hard to shake off, and he does really good work getting, like, working for submissions and getting control positions and things like that. Whereas Sanchez just kind of rides through, like, gets into a mess, and he fights through the mess, but it's a mess. And I think that favors Morales just a bit. So I'm leaning for Morales on this one.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, there's something about Sanchez's game, about how his ability to get into those ugly scrambles that you mentioned, but it's not even luck. It's like some guys just have a really good instinct to just somehow end out in a really good neutral position and then just start from there. Sometimes, in many cases, it's just a matter of, timing, and it's just something that they're naturally good at, good balance and agility. Sanchez, definitely a great striker for, someone who had been coming up in that flyweight scene down in the Texas area. Another LFA product, started out when it was Legacy, moved up through LFA. Now he's taking on Morales, who is a Team Alpha Male product. Uriah Faber apparently has been hyping this guy a lot, from what I understand. He's in for pretty good reason. I mean, the guy's a really talented grappler, very good at keeping himself heavy, very good at a lot of the control positions and making transitions work, forcing his opponent to make mistakes, baiting him with hand traps and such. What really I think would be the thing to look out for here is whether or not Morales uses this to control and eat up the clock and eventually ride out to an eventual decision. Because I don't think cardio is going to be a factor. I don't really see him breaking Sanchez down. Sanchez is savvy. I can see him maybe getting a little, not so much him getting careless with a submission, but rather that Morales' submission game is just that good. So it would say more about him than it would about Sanchez. That said, for some reason, I mean, Sanchez is wily. I'm pretty sure he's fought smart in the past, and I think he's smart enough to know what his strengths are and what his advantages would be in this fight. So it seems to me that I'd still have to favor Morales, but I think it's going to be a lot more fun, personally. Wow, what the hell happened to you? Is this?
Yeah, I'm still here. My web camera is it's dying. It appears.
No, I'm just glad that this isn't like Videodrome becoming real, because I've been watching.
Yeah, no, I'm not being absorbed by my television. I will not be growing a gun out of my chest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm back.
Yay, you're back.
Buy a new webcam apparently, because my setup is like everything is that could go wrong today has been going wrong. Technically, today is just in the shitter.
Well, you jinxed it. You jinxed it by not flexing at the beginning of the video. That's what you should have done.
It's true. I was supposed to be out here like flash, but
yeah.
I think it's. So wait, who are you picking?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Morales as being the safer bet here.
Yeah, I just think his jiu-jitsu is a little better, and I can't see Sanchez just keeping this on the feet. Like watching the way he strikes, he wants to run in on people. And he will get himself off balance running in, and then he gets in the clinch, and he just like the fight just sort of devolves from there. And if he could just keep this standing, I think he could win it, but I don't think it's in his nature. Odds have Sanchez riding as the slight favorite at the moment. He opened at -180 and adjusted up to -139, now at -132. Morales opening at +140, adjusting down quickly to +115, now down to +107. Closer to even this fight is, the more sense it makes to me. Like these guys have both. Morales is the only one who has a TKO on his record, and I would bet dollars to dog shit that's a ground and pound TKO. Like neither of these guys, they both are very grappling heavy, submission heavy fighters, and that may mean that in what could be a pretty even fight, it might be worth taking a better look at. Let's see, fight goes to decision is +130, fight doesn't go to decision -160. Sanchez by submission is +255, Morales by submission +490. So if you think either guy has a grappling edge, that might be something to look at. I don't know. I mean, these are two dudes who basically only finish by submission. Yeah. But I honestly would not bet. I don't think you can make a clear distinction on who's going to win. I expect it to be a messy ground battle. And for two undefeated dudes, it might mean that their submission defense is both good enough to make it to a decision.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I mean, it's hard to find a guy who's consistently knocking people out of flyweight. So it is what it is. Yeah.
All right. That brings us to the prelims, the Fox Sports 1 prelims, bantamweight bout. Jose Alberto Quinonez versus Diego Rivas.
Yeah, I know we've complained about this in the past, but can we stop with the fucking Pitbull nickname? Can we just kill that already? Like, this guy hasn't been fighting for that long. Like, I mean, okay, 2011 maybe, but like, dude, even by then it was played out. All right, so Diego Rivas, Pitbull, 7-0 as a professional, training out of King's MMA, coming off a really good win against Noad Lahat. That was a TKO, I believe, and that was in February of last year. Not sure what the layoff was about, but very strong, very durable, a bit slow. I mean, he's not as slow as he may seem at first glance, but he's not necessarily fast enough to deal with some of the other guys in his division. And that's going to eventually cost him as he moves up the ladder. So his takedown defense is okay. His ground game is pretty decent. And, of course, his striking technique is, it's been looking good, especially when you look at some of his earlier fights compared to how he looked coming into the UFC. He's going to be taking on Jose Quinonez, who is largely an alliance guy out of San Diego. And I was actually pleasantly surprised that I thought that this was maybe his second UFC fight. Turns out this is his third. Also a veteran of the Ultimate Fighter Latin America. I think he was part of that first season. Yeah, that was it, the one with Bentley Seiler. Did pretty well for himself, actually. Very, he's got some finishes. Not, necessarily a finishing machine, but Quinonez is a handful for some of these guys. And what worries me right now is how much he does take a bit of damage in some of his bouts. I mean, I do think that Rivas has enough to, knock him out if need be, if it actually comes to that. But I don't know, man. I'm starting to think that Quinonez is probably going to fight a little smarter, use his range and his distance a little better. I think he's going to be able to avoid any sort of trouble on the ground and eventually, again, probably just eke out a decision and just by virtue of having a more complete game.
So, yeah, you're picking Quinonez here?
Yep, that's me. Yep.
I got to agree. I think Rivas, the big thing I've seen with Rivas, we know he can be an electric talent at times. Like, he's got power. He's got the ability to uncork, he's got the ability to uncork a flying knee on Noah Lahat and knock him out in, like, a great highlight. He also has the ability to lose every minute of that Noah Lahat fight up until landing that big flying knee.
Mm.
And his lack of control and his lack of ability to really keep a striking battle where he wants and to keep consistent offense going as he strikes seems like it's going to be a consistent problem for him, where if he's not landing something huge, if he's not making something big happen, then dudes are just going to, they're going to punish him every round for it. And Quinonez is a guy who really seems to have stepped up his footwork a lot to build his scrambling wrestle grappling game, where he can, like, pick around, move around on the outside, and then just sort of duck in with something wild and creative that leads to a takedown and a scramble that he can get the better of. And he's been doing that really pretty damn well lately. I mean, he looked great in his fight with Joey Gomez. He looked great in his fight with Leonardo Morales. And I just don't think that the way Rivas has been fighting lately is going to help him in a fight like this. I see Quinonez being able to have too much success with his wrestling. And partially I want to say, like, oh, Rivas, he's only 25. He started fighting in 2011, but he hasn't been really fighting regularly at all. Even up into the UFC, he's only had 7 fights overall. So we could expect him to make a big leap, to adjust and to bring something big the next time out. But Quinonez as well, he's 27 and he's been training out at, Jackson MMA and Alliance and Entrum and places like that. And he's also only had 7 fights. So there's every bit as much chance that he brings a new level to his game as well. And currently his game, I think, just matches up poorly with Rivas's, or Rivas's game matches up poorly with him, I should say.
Mm.
So I'm picking Quinonez as well. And the odds on this, Quinonez is a pretty serious favorite, opening at -175 and dropping all the last few days, now down to -245. Rivas opening at +135, moving out to +201. I would say for 2 inexperienced dudes, if I don't know if that line gets wider on Rivas, maybe worth looking at or something. But I don't bet, so I don't want to give anybody that kind of advice. I would say it probably shouldn't be that wide for 2 dudes who are really inexperienced and have the ability to make big jumps fight to fight. Because we have seen Rivas has been winning. He's undefeated. He's not there's a reason he's not dropping fights, and it's because he's got some power, he's got some talent. And on the other side, Quinonez, he has dropped some fights. He has met some hard matchups, especially dudes that he can't out-wrestle. Dudes like Davi Ramos and Alejandro Perez, who's actually just a pretty functional sort of striker with a decent takedown defense game. So
right.
That doesn't look like Rivas at the moment, but if he comes out of a great camp, it could look like Rivas, 25-year-old, has corners to turn. That brings us to a bantamweight fight. Henry Briones, Yahya, and I don't know. This is a tough one for me. Briones is like, I'm sad that Connor isn't here to break this down. No offense, but Briones is one of the dudes that is like everything. I just know that Connor would be sitting there at half-masts over Henry Briones right now, getting ready to talk about a functional technical boxer who's an underwhelming physical specimen and fights pretty smart.
That sounds fair, yeah.
Yeah, he just, it's exactly the kind of dude that Connor loves. There's a reason he went to decision with Cody Garbrandt when Thomas Almeida couldn't. Partially it's because Garbrandt was a little raw at the time, but it's also partially because Briones is a tough dude who he fights tough and he fights technically and he stays to a pretty limited game that makes him hard to deal with. And unfortunately, I just don't think it's the kind of game it makes this fight tough to pick because Yahya is in kind of a moment of an identity crisis. Mm. He's been trying to get to a title shot lately, and he's been really decisively hard on himself on his way to that title shot. Like when he beat Michinori Tanaka, he came out and he was like, I want to call somebody out, but I know that performance sucked, so I can't really. So I need to fight whoever. And he ended up with a fight with Joe Soto, who beat him. And in that Soto fight, Yahya came out throwing hands. He came out fighting like kickboxer Yahya, and it was K1 Damian Maia,
Yeah, no, that performance, I know we harp a lot on the whole, like, you're only as good as your last performance and all that, but that really set him back. I don't know, man. That was not good.
Yeah, and because the problem is not that, like, honestly, Yahya's got a great chin, and he's always been way too lackadaisical as a fighter for his own good. So seeing him go out and just, like, try to put it on somebody, as a fighter who's not afraid of getting taken down in any position, it's good to see him open up his striking game. The problem is that striking game he tried to work exhausted him. He was able to do it for a round, and then he was shot. Just totally blew his gas tank doing that. And if he does that against Henry Briones, there's a very good chance that Briones can piece him up. Like, Briones is a solid, crafty vet with a very good, fundamentally based boxing game. But otherwise, I would have to give this fight to Yahya. Like, Yahya has shown time and time again, whether you're an elite athlete, whether you are a crafty vet, whether you're Masanori Kanehara or whether you're Matthew Lopez or whether you're Michinori Tanaka or you're Mizuto Hirota, Yahya can suck you into his pace of fight and beat you at it. It's usually, there are a few rare grapplers. His biggest problem is probably, honestly, guys that can really deal with his wrestling and grappling game. Guys like Chad Mendez, guys like Joseph Benavidez, guys like Tom Ninamaki and Joe Soto, who can largely shut him down on the ground. And then he has to rely on other things, and it makes him a little sloppy. And I'm not sure Briones can do that. So I'm going to lean Yahya still, despite his funky performance last time out. I think Briones will allow himself to be sort of pulled into Yahya's game, but if Yahya just comes out looking to throw hands and try to outbox Briones and gasses himself, then all bets are off.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Briones on this one precisely because of that. I don't think it's just the fact that Yahya is going to exhaust himself. I mean, I don't think it's just that. I think it's going to be a situation where he oversteps his bounds, overcommits on one too many punches, and then that's when Briones starts to take over and lay that pressure. And I think Briones is not going to be reckless enough to, say there's a knockdown or, the situation ends up where Yahya's on the ground. I don't think he's going to jump into his guard and, try to do all that crazy shit. If he follows him to strike, he's going to keep a respectable distance and try to get some pot shots from standing position. But I don't really think he's going to be doing much to follow him there. So I got to go with Briones on this. I just think that his striking is far more composed, and the MMA game is favoring strikers so much lately. I don't know, man. I don't really see Yahya really getting – I think at some point too, like I've been saying this for a while, fighters get figured out. And I think that what we saw in that last fight with Joe Soto, we saw where the holes in his game was. We saw how really had to deal with him and his takedowns and how they're decidedly not that great. They're not very dynamic. He's not super athletic either. So, I mean, I think Yahya is athletic, but not so much that he'd cause the kind of problems that Briones can't handle. So I'm going to have to go with him on that.
Yeah, it is worth noting here, too. One of the big factors I should relate is, it's at elevation. And, it's a Mexico City elevation. So for a guy like Yahya who can gas out terribly, that could be bad news. I'm seeing some reports that he has been out there at least 8 days to adjust to elevation, at least. But Briones has been out there at least 2 weeks, also by the same metric. So,
yeah, you really got to give far bigger advantage to the guy who's been at altitude for longer. Even if it takes longer for him to get to like peak performance, he just needs that edge to be. You don't need to outrun the lion. You just need to outrun the other guy.
It should also be noted, Quinonez has been out. From what I'm seeing here, this is all from Combat Docket. I want to give them a shout out on Twitter at Combat Docket. They put together a list of how long everybody's been out at altitude. And Quinonez, 25 days.
Jesus.
And Rivas, 12. So, and then Morales, 14 days. And Sanchez, 3. So especially for that Morales pick, that could be a big thing for him. And Herrera has been out 10 days, and Rinaldi will be there fight week. So that's something to watch out for, that Herrera-Rinaldi fight, where we're both picking Rinaldi. And Yahya Briones, that's a tough one because it really does make a question. I'm going to stick with my feeling of Yahya on this one. Like, he so rarely loses fights that, it seems like so often there's so few fights that Yahya loses when he should. But altitude is setting him up here, definitely. So I'm going to pick him, but I'm going to do it even despite his trash gas tank and at altitude, but you're
going to hold your nose and go with that.
Yeah, I'm going to hold my nose and go with it. So,
yeah.
After that, now we've got a flyweight. Let's see. Did I read the odds on that? Odds. Yahya is the favorite. Opened at -195, adjusted up to -149, has been falling back down ever since that adjustment, down to -169 now. So people are still money coming in on Yahya. Briones opening at +155, adjusted down to +124, and has slowly been drifting back up to +141. So Briones is the underdog here to Yahya. Especially if you think altitude's going to be a big problem for Yahya, then that's worth looking at, because we've seen, Yahya at that Mexico City altitude plays hell with people in ways that they don't expect at all. Brings us to a flyweight bout: Dustin Ortiz versus Hector Sandoval. That's you.
I have to be probably the only person who's like really pumped to see this fight. I mean, like, you know, a lot of
It'd
people
be a
don't
good
like
fight.
flyweights. I mean, a lot of people don't like flyweights. A lot of people don't like wrestling heavy flyweights. But these two, they can move and they can fight, man. And that's it's going to be really great to see. We've seen Dustin Ortiz work with Rufus Sport. He's really good at using his jab. You know, the whole stick and move. I mean, he's his boxing is not just functional. It's actually pretty good for what he needs in order to be successful at flyweight, in order to be mobile, in order to transition to any phase of the game, wherever it takes him, whether that means shooting it for a takedown or defending one and working a submission right away. Whereas Sandoval, much more of a wrestler, much heavier style, much more of a stocky guy, you know, not maybe the most fleet of foot, definitely not as doesn't have the kind of foot speed that Ortiz has, but he can uncork some pretty heavy shots. And I don't know if it's maybe the way he sets it up. I don't know what it is exactly that he's doing, but he nails some shots. So you go, I don't know. Maybe the guy didn't see that coming, or he just was out of position. Maybe he's smarter in his shot selection and his timing. That said, I still got to go with Dustin Ortiz on this. I think that he's a more complete fighter. Not only that, but he's a savvier wrestler. He takes more calculated risks. He's really good at keeping that control on the ground, and he knows how to work his way out of some ugly spots. I mean, anytime we've seen him on the ground in any disadvantage, it's got to be a guy who's really, really super good to keep him in trouble for a period of time. So even then, he's able to make the most of it and spring right back up to get the fight where he needs it. Whether that is, of course, if that means that it needs to be standing, well, then he'll get to that. So it's always good to have some reliance on someone who, you know, can at least have that backup plan. I feel like he's got more backup plans than Sandoval. I mean, his cardio has been proven to be great. His striking has proven to be good. Now, again, Sandoval can change the tide of the fight. I mean, he's got a higher percentage of doing so than Ortiz with one or two punches, but he's got to land those first. And I don't really think Ortiz has deteriorated to that point. I still think he's rather stable. I still think he's a good enough fighter and a great enough athlete to handle this year. So I'm going to have to go with Ortiz.
He's only 28 at this point. I mean, Ortiz has been around for a while. You know, he's 7 years into his career, but he's still in his 20s. He's certainly not hitting a downslide yet, I don't think. The big worry for me here would be that Ortiz coming out at fight week to train, or to Mexico City for fight week only, and especially Rufus Sport. Although, actually, I'm not sure he's with Rufus Sport anymore.
Well, he was for a time. Yeah.
I think he's last I heard he was maybe in like Tennessee or something now. Like,
and he might have gone back home for this one.
Yeah, I think he's been at smaller camps lately. So, but either way, Rufus Sport or Tennessee, neither of those are, you know, neither of those are mountainous regions where he can train easily at altitude. You know, I mean, I realize the Appalachians are there, but they're not that high. But so that gives me a pause. It also gives me a pause that in his fight with Brandon Moreno, part of what happened in that fight is it did look like Ortiz got tired after wrestling Moreno and grappling with him for a round. He started to slow down a little when Moreno caught him. Otherwise, I really do have to pick Ortiz in this fight. I think part of the thing with Sandoval, part to his benefit, is that one of the ways that he can catch people is that he's actually a pretty small flyweight. So he gets to kind of swing up at people in the flyweight division in a way that they're really not used to. You know, he's only 5'2", but Ortiz is a pretty mechanical striker still. He's never learned to be like a really fluid in the pocket, like masterful striker. But he's functional. Like, he's defensively functional. He knows how to get in and out of range. He knows how to see shots coming and things like that. Unless you're somebody like Moreno, who can really surprise him, or somebody like Wilson Hayes, who can really who can make him fear the ground game and sort of throw him off with that.
Right.
And Sandoval doesn't present that problem. Sandoval, to his own sort of, I think something he's going to struggle with constantly at flyweight is that he's a power wrestler. And that means like being a 5'2" power wrestler at flyweight, you know, you're going to be the smallest guy there. If you're not going to out technique guys, going out and trying to hulk them down is just not going to serve you that well. And I don't think he can out wrestle Ortiz, and I don't think he can set up his strikes creatively enough to really surprise Ortiz. So I'm going to take Ortiz to just kind of keep control and grind on Sandoval and outwork him and get positions and make this an ugly grappling, wrestling heavy fight that he controls. But it is, you know, the altitude's worth a note. And if Ortiz starts to fade, Sandoval's power is there, and it's something to watch for. But I'm picking Ortiz to ride it out and get the decision here. Odds on this fight, Dustin Ortiz is the favorite, opening at -230 and adjusting up and down, eventually moving down to -234 and slowly rising back up from then to -221 now. Not a lot of movement on the line after the opening, and Sandoval opening at +170, adjusting up and down, and eventually rising up to +193 and now falling back to +178. So money moving those lines closer together as the fight gets near. I'm not surprised. The altitude playing in there, Sandoval's power, Ortiz still never being, you know, his club and sub loss to Moreno last time out. I'm not surprised those are getting a little closer there. That brings us to a middleweight bout, Brad Scott, Jack Hermansson. I'm going to channel Connor here and be really pretty secretly excited for this fight because I love those generic middleweight bouts. Scott he's one of those dudes that looks so lumbering and so slow that you assume that he's just going to be like the least effective fighter in the world. And then he just has a ton of natural sort of grit and power to him, where he's just like, he's lumbering into people and they can see him coming. And here's this like huge right hand coming over the top that just like looks like it's just at this glacial pace. And then it cracks somebody and they're down on the floor for a second, wondering what the hell happened. And it's just like, he's just this big, powerful plotter. He reminds me a bit of Dan Kelly, frankly.
Yeah.
Although Dan Kelly has much faster hands, which is a weird thing to say.
Well, but I mean, the speed thing, as far as their general speed and how they move, I see that.
Yeah, how they move. I think Scott may also have a judo base. He's got that thing where he's just like, people shoot on him. They'll shoot a takedown and hit his hips deep, and he'll just lean forward and stuff the shot. And you'll just be like, you just leaned. Like, you didn't. There's no reason that person's momentum should have been stopped, but he's just kind of a brick shithouse. So there's that. On the other side, Hermansson is, you know, the fleet-footed, bouncy, sort of technical boxer with a wrestle grappling game behind it. It's a surprising secondary layer. It's a better wrestling and grappling game than is like the default for the division, but not elite. It's kind of thing that when he's fighting Alex Nicholson, he can take Alex Nicholson down and pulp him in like 30 seconds. But if he's fighting somebody more difficult than that, he ends up having to keep it standing. I think Scott's going to give him the right kind of fight for Hermansson. Hermansson, really, all of his striking is about building behind his jab. If he can establish his jab, then he starts landing combinations behind it, and he's a really tough boxer to handle. Against Cesar Ferreira, Ferreira being a left-handed fighter, that really shut him down. And Ferreira was also very prepared for Hermansson. It was just sort of like a career best performance for Herrera. The jab was gone. He was ready for everything Hermansson was doing. I don't think Scott has that number. I don't think he's got it dialed in. I think Scott tends to spend most of his time punching out of orthodox, and he's not fast enough to track Hermansson down easily. So I think that Hermansson can build this fight behind his jab. He may not be able to out-wrestle Scott easily, but if it's just going to be a straight boxing match, which is most of what Brad Scott does, then I got to give Hermansson the edge just for his ability to create a more technical, varied offense at range.
Yeah. So you're going with Hermansson on this? I'm
going with Hermansson.
Okay. Now I'm going to make this as succinct as possible. Now I do agree with you on the Hermansson front. I do think he's going to win. I wasn't very thrilled about this when I saw the initial thing and started watching the video of him because, you know, it is the kind of throwaway middleweight fight. You kind of – the thing about middleweight is you don't really know where the middle of the pack is and where it ends.
Middle.
Like it's all middle and low. You know what I mean? Like you have the elite and then it's like the whole heap. And it's a very –
ranking number 150 to ranking number 5 is all middle. Like Jack Hermansson might be able to beat, you know, like Tim Boach, you know?
It's such an unforgiving division, but then again, I don't know what's going on with the fighters that are coming in and sort of this weird revolving door that we're seeing, but it's like, fuck, you don't see that kind of evolution or growth that you're seeing elsewhere. You know, like you wouldn't see this happening even at light heavyweight or even heavyweight itself, which is the most chaotic. But look, that's probably another conversation. I don't want to ramble too much on that end because God knows I fucking can. The way I see it, smart money is Hermansson picking Scott apart from a distance, maybe trying to work a takedown later in the fight to really exhaust him, probably clinching against the fence and working a trip from there, then pretty much just punishing him on the ground and trying to improve position as he does so. The problem is I've got this really strong hunch, and I wish I had something more concrete and scientific here. I have a really, really strong hunch that Scott is probably going to have some kind of crazy breakout moment where – you know, I don't know that it's going to be necessarily standing. I don't think he's got enough to capitalize on this whole thing standing unless Hermansson gets too lax. But I really think that if at some point this reaches the ground, maybe say Hermansson's in half guard from top or something like that, Scott's going to be able to start working incrementally to get something going on the ground and maybe might trap him.
You taking Scott by submission?
I mean, Scott's got a lot of submissions on his record, dude. I mean, you look at how many he's got, and most of them are chokes. It's like guys like that.
They're all guillotines and rear naked chokes.
Right. So, I mean, here's a guy who's really good at catching guys getting sloppy, shooting in mostly because that's how you get a lot of guillotines, or guys overextending themselves or maybe breaking them down and eventually catching the back position.
Hurting them and getting on their back. That's
wild scrambles as we've seen. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't have enough faith in Scott to actually say, yes, I think he's going to win. But if the odds are good enough and you got a little money burning a hole in your pocket, I'm not saying you should, but I'm just saying it might not be the worst idea out there. So, look, if you're watching,
been submitted twice, an arm triangle choke and a triangle choke. You know, Cesar Ferreira, who's really actually like his jiu-jitsu is probably the most legit part of his game and the most underutilized part of his game.
Yes.
And Jason Butcher, who once, you know, made the laughable but fun claim to have the best guard in MMA.
Oh, well, good for him, I guess.
But, you know, he was all about catching people in triangles.
Yeah.
I just don't see Hermansson otherwise getting submitted. But
yeah, it's really hard for me to see it. But, I mean, the fact that it's one of those things that's like, okay, it's not just possible. It's teetering on the line of likely, but just not enough for me to guarantee, you know, and say with any confidence, say like, yeah, he's going to do it. Don't be surprised if it happens. Is what
okay.
I'm going to go on Hermansson. I'm agreeing with you, but if it does end up being an upset, it's like, oh, there it is.
Hermansson reportedly, according to Combat Docket, Hermansson has been at Mexico City for 11 days out, and Scott is fight week.
Nah, fuck you then. Yeah, okay, Hermansson. All right, whatever. Never mind.
All right, that brings us to the main card. Alejandro Perez, Andre Soukhamthath. And this is you.
Yeah, man. I mean, okay, we've been doing these for at least I've been doing vivisections with you for about just over 3 years now. And the funny thing is, thank you for putting up with me. The funny thing is that we were mostly doing Bellator and World Series of Fighting, and a lot of that New England circuit, a lot of those guys had one thing in common. They had all either fought or been on cards with Soukhamthath for all that time, and now he's finally in the UFC. So, like, I've seen this guy, whether I wanted to or not, I've seen a bunch of his fights since way back then. And the thing is, currently at 11-4, and now that he's in Florida, where he was, training with what was a Blackzilians, and I believe he's still with Henry Hooft, his UFC debut wasn't what it could have been against Albert Morales. I don't really think he was able to pull the trigger in that fight. I don't think he was able to demonstrate what he's really capable of. His striking style is pretty brutal when he lets it loose, but he never really let it loose in that first fight. Now, whether it's octagon jitters or poor preparation or bad weight cut, I mean, who knows, right? It's a fight game. A lot of these things can happen because it's random as fuck. But I really, really think that at this point, Soukhamthath's takedown defense is really good. His ability to work against the cage, again, also really good. He's really good at keeping the top position, at least when it comes to his top half guard. Very important for keeping transitions and pinning a guy down, and then eventually getting back up if he needs to. Now, Alejandro Perez is, really tough dude. He's currently been, let's see here, he's had 4 UFC fights. Well, no, 5, actually. That was that draw against Albert Morales as well. Oh, they both had him as common opponent last time out. I don't know, man. I just don't see him as having the kind of counter game that would be able to make Soukhamthath really question anything when it comes to throwing his strikes. I think at some point he's just going to get comfortable enough to style on him, and Pettis is just going to really end up beating shots, and then trying to whiff, just basically trying to counter and whiffing on the way out. His wrestling game isn't going to be enough. His submission game probably won't be enough either. So, yeah, I got to go with Andre on this, unless he just arrived 10 minutes ago to Mexico City.
So I have a couple things. I can explain what happened in the Morales fight, which is so a big part of Soukhamthath's game is that he is an amazingly slow starter.
Yes.
He's a very good technical striker, but why he wasn't letting his hands go is that if you watch his fights, what he does a lot early is it's single power shots and single big strikes, probing, trying to get comfortable, trying to find his range, and then late in the second, into the third round is when he starts opening up his combinations. But it takes him like a round and a half to 2 rounds to really get comfortable. And in that fight against Morales, Albert Morales, he also cut 18 pounds in 3 days or something. He cut a ton of weight, so that by the time he got to the point where he could have opened his striking up, he was gassed to hell.
Yep.
So that was a big part of what happened in that fight. The other thing I got to say is, apparently, by report, Soukhamthath will be out in Mexico City 3 days. Maybe that's 3 days ahead of fight week.
I hope so for his sake.
But it's not a lot of time. Perez has been training at 6,000 feet a week prior to fight week. So I think these are prior to fight. How long prior to fight week? The numbers I'm seeing. So 3 weeks or 3 days out ahead of fight week is Soukhamthath, which is not that long.
No.
And Perez is a week ahead of fight week, training at altitude, which is better. It's not great, but it's better. Otherwise, I gotta agree, this should be Soukhamthath's fight, and it may still be, but that's a big worry. Because Perez, a big part of his game, and one of the reasons that he was able to do so well in a fight against somebody like Ian Entwistle is that he really likes to stay on his back foot and be defensive, move a lot, make you charge in on him and then answer with hard counters in the pocket. He's just like, once you step in and commit with him, he's not even really countering. It's that once you step into the pocket and commit on something and you actually track him down, then he'll wing off like 3 or 4 hard punches to either try and hurt you or back you out in exchange. And against somebody like Entwistle, who's a grappler, that meant that, who's always just trying to dive for a leg lock, that basically meant that you had to dive from way outside on Perez and really telegraph everything. And for Soukhamthath, that technically will play right into Soukhamthath's slow starting desire to have a power range game where he just wants to sit at the edge of striking range and throw one big shot, stay outside, circle, and like Perez should give him just the right shot, the right game to really warm up, take his time, get into the flow of the fight, land the harder shots, and take over as the fight goes on. It's just a question of altitude. So if Soukhamthath gets himself tired, then it could be that, he has a slow, close fight for 2 rounds and the 3rd round comes and he's too tired to open up his offense. I'm still going to lean towards him here, but it sucks to have to think about that extra factor because I think that this matchup works perfectly for him.
I agree.
Odds on this fight, Andre Soukhamthath is the very slight underdog, opening at plus 100, adjusting down to minus 127, and slowly adjusting up all the way after that. Now back at plus 101 now. So he dropped to favorite odds and has slowly marched back up to underdog odds. Perez opened at minus 140, went all the way up to minus 106, and has slowly fallen back down to minus 126. So maybe it's the altitude. Maybe it's just Perez's longer record in the UFC, him coming off a draw over Albert Morales, whereas Soukhamthath lost his fight to Albert Morales.
It could be lack of recognition, too. A lot of people don't really, recognize Soukhamthath that well. So
yeah.
Could be that. The betting attitudes are what they are.
But it was, Perez and Soukhamthath had pretty similar fights with Morales in that both got a little overwhelmed early and then came on late, but Soukhamthath gassed out, whereas in Perez's fight with Morales, it was Morales who really spent his gas tank and Perez was able to be controlled and make his offense really start to count as the fight went on. But Soukhamthath is less likely to run out of ideas in the way Morales did. May gas. But I hate just like basing a fight pick entirely around altitude.
I know, and it's crazy hypotheticals because he probably like, what if he goes out there and it doesn't even affect him? Like it maybe like a 10% margin. Like you never know. That's the worst thing about this trying to predict this stuff.
Yep. All right, that brings us to a middleweight bout: Sam Alvey, Rashad Evans, and this is a little depressing to break down.
Oh yeah.
In part because I really have to pick Sam Alvey here. So obviously there's a big chance that Rashad Evans could come out, work his wrestling game, get takedowns, push Alvey into the fence, make this a grind. Alvey, for his strength and his ability to work a clinch game, does almost no clinch striking. Like, he is a ridiculously inactive clinch fighter for as much time as he ends up caught in the clinch, or even with advantageous positions in the clinch. In his fight with Elias Theodorou, like, he got, minutes of that fight with Theodorou's back against the fence and still really clearly lost a decision doing no offense in those positions at all. So Rashad has those chances, and he's a faster striker. He is a more diverse striker. But I mean, this is a dude who was getting caught clean by Daniel Kelly. And Kelly is sneaky. He's got good timing. He has a really natural rhythm and feel for the fight. But so does Sam Alvey. I mean, Sam Alvey has made his whole career out of only really throwing one punch, but timing it well enough that if you come in on him and you're there to be hit, he will land it and knock you out with it. And Alvey's shown a little bit more willingness to wade in lately, to throw a little more offense, to be a little more aggressive in ways that mean that he does a little more damage, and he's still got a really good chin. Alvey is really hard to hurt, hard to knock out. Evans, he just seems too easy to hurt. And a big thing in the Kelly fight is he's kind of compromising his offense in weird ways where he'll just he'll throw these sharp punches that he used to throw. And he always had that kind of swagger to him and that, leaning forward, throwing stuff. But maybe it's his reaction times are a step slower. Maybe it's something like that. But he's just really right there to be hit clean on the return when he's throwing stuff. I mean, he'd stand in front of Kelly and throw a punch and then get hit twice hard on the chin. And it was just like, this is so bad. And I can't pick him to survive 3 rounds of doing that against Sam Alvey. Maybe he can make this a grind. Maybe he can just wrestle Alvey into the mat. He's certainly a good enough wrestler. But holding people down and just keeping them there has never really been Rashad's game.
No.
He wants to create offense. He wants to punish people. And it, at his best, he's great at it. But it's been a while since Rashad Evans looked like he was at his best. I mean, even that Chael Sonnen win is 4 years ago now, and that's his last win.
Yeah. And it was against a shot Chael Sonnen.
Yeah. It was against Chael Sonnen that we now realize may be exceptionally prone to just giving up when things don't go his way.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, I mean, look, the only positive thing I can say about this is that even if Rashad gets knocked out, it still won't be as sad as watching BJ Penn's decline. But that's not that it's that much better. Thing is, Alvey, and no one really gives him that kind of credit for this, but he was just really, really good at setting up these hand traps and baiting the opponents, just sucking them in to eventually wade in and just eat a shot or two, and then he puts them down like he shot him with an elephant rifle or something like that, right? He's really, really deceptively quick with his hands, but that's really most of his game. He's durable. He can survive on the ground well enough. He can sort of work his way to get back on top and then, eventually stand up where the fight favors him. But Rashad, last few performances we've seen, he's a day late and a dollar short with his shots. His timing isn't right. His head movement isn't where it needs to be. I mean, you saw how Dan Kelly was able to succeed against him. And again, I think Rashad Evans has been figured out. I think that the time off and everything has sort of made him now a fighter who is not only hesitant, but even when he does start throwing hands, it's just not there. You know what I mean? He's not really connecting with this, with the shots that he wants to connect, or really that many shots at all. So, I mean, if you're not really creating effective offense, what are we really doing here? I would have thought that he would have retired after his last fight, or at least after the Sonnen win, but here we are.
He reminds me a lot right now of, oh man, go back a fight here, a card here. He reminds me a lot of Josh Berkman lately.
Mm-hmm.
A lot.
Well, the only difference,
even you see Josh Berkman come out, the reinvigorated Josh Berkman, and in his last fight, that is the first time Berkman has shown up in a few years now, and he just gets knocked out for his trouble. against a guy who used to never be known as a power puncher and is only really showing flashes of power lately, and is not certainly one of the better lightweights out there. And Berkman, that's kind of feels like where Rashad is, where right now he's the super hesitant, unwilling to let his hands go Rashad. But even if he goes out and puts opens his offense up more, I don't trust him not to just get cracked and knocked out. So
yeah. I mean, Rashad should have dropped to middleweight ages ago, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of a slightly depressing fight. Sam Alvey is currently the favorite right now, opening at minus 165, rising all the time now at minus 140 ever since opening. So people are not putting money on him. Rashad Evans opened at plus 125, stayed pretty stable for a little while, and has since dropped now down to plus 114. So, I mean, I get that prime Rashad would have taken Sam Alvey's lunch money, but it feels like a few years since we've seen prime Rashad, and Sam Alvey's still going out pretty much being the same fighter he's been for, a long time now, for 7 or 8 years now.
Yeah, at least.
That brings us to a featherweight bout. Oh wait, let me see the altitude on that. Rashad, 15 days ahead of fight week, which is a good solid amount of time. Alvey, though, did his whole camp at Big Bear, so he did his own camp at altitude in the States.
Yeah, it's not Mexico City altitude, but it's something.
Yeah. All right, that brings us to a featherweight bout. Martin Bravo, Humberto Bandenay, and is this you or me? I've forgotten now.
I don't know.
You. This is you.
Okay, well, you know what? I really fully expect this fight to be brutally hideous. Martin Bravo was the winner of Ultimate Fighter, what was it, Season 3? Yeah, Latin America Season 3. And, he got a couple of decisions on his way to the finals where he ended up winning by TKO, knocking out Claudio Puelles. And you know what? Here's the thing with both of these guys. They're lanky. They are quick to scramble and take a guy down. They're more than willing to trade when it comes to standing up. Very much these strange wrestle boxers who don't have that much form or technique when things start to get, a little loose in the fight. Like, it start being a little technical, but then everything else, just like even their takedown attempts, it's just like, I'm just going to duck in here and run at the guy like the Juggernaut or something. And you start seeing that a lot, and I don't know what that's going to lead to. So, I mean, this is kind of a pick 'em in a way, right? Like, Bravo, yeah, you could say he's got a tough track record because he went through Ultimate Fighter, the quick succession of guys there. He's beaten a couple of Americans. Well, actually, no, he's only beaten, I think, one American there. So I don't know if the guy had a wrestling background or not. I can't really say how he'd be dealing with a guy who's got better wrestling than him. But geez, Bravo does train at Entrim Gym with a bunch of the other guys here on this card. Like, there's almost every Mexican fighter on this card, at least, even if it's
all the UFC's Mexican fighters that are actually from Mexico. Train at
the majority. Yeah, the majority are with them, and I don't know if they have some sort of partnership with Alliance MMA or what, but it's working out for them. Whereas Bandenay is coming out of that Peruvian scene where, I mean, he does train with Team Oyama, which is great. So hopefully that'll help with his wrestling and maybe get him to something that's a little more technical, but. Again, his striking, he might be able to use his range and his length, but for how long, So, again, very, very ugly fight. I don't know why it's this high up on the card, but, I mean, if anything, Bravo is the replacement here. Yeah, I don't like this at all. Flip a coin. I'm just going to go with Bravo on this.
For Grutzmacher.
There you go. Well, I'm going to go with Bravo on this. So, there's that.
Yeah, Bandenay is a late replacement. Doesn't give me a lot of faith. I probably wouldn't worry that much about him at altitude since he's training out of, he's coming out of gyms in Peru. So, like, if anybody's training at altitude, it's probably Peruvian dudes.
Yeah, most of them, yeah.
Let's see. Bravo, unconfirmed, trains at 65 feet.
Oh, okay.
We don't know what altitude Bravo's been training at, but I would bet if it's unconfirmed, he's probably he's probably had the opportunity to go to Mexico City and do some work there. I would hope.
I hope so.
Yeah. Bandenay actually did his camp at Big Bear, so.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
There's that. I would still pick Bravo here. Bravo to me is one of those dudes. Like, I remember seeing him watching footage on him as he was going into tough before he got there, and he's a dude. Like, he's not the best athlete in the world, but he's a dude that just seems to do everything right. Like, he's raw and he's a little unstructured, a little wild, but he stuffs takedowns the right way. He fills his offense with volume all the time, always throwing in combinations, always working to hurt people. He's got a great chin. Like, he's just built to win rounds until a better athlete who's better trained can really shut him down. And I don't see that as Bandenay. He seems like he might be a slightly better athlete in the same way that Claudio Puelles was a slightly better athlete than Bravo, but less, probably not as tough, probably not able to keep the tempo of a fight going as well. And Bravo, I like the way he fights too much. I think he's a good, functional, go-forward, aggressive combination boxer with who does a reasonable job of stuffing takedowns. And Bandenay seems like he starts out technical and then just gets wilder and sloppier as the fight goes on. So I'm taking Bravo here. Bravo is coming in as a pretty big favorite, in fact. Opened at minus 315, went up to minus 294, is now at minus 306. A little up and down there. Bandenay up and down, opened at plus 235, is now at plus 245 after going up and down a bunch. I don't know why odds would be that far apart for a Martin Bravo fight. Dude, he's still not a great athlete, and he's, still wild.
I got to wonder how many people are betting on this then. Again,
yeah, I mean, the odds have been bouncing around a lot, so I don't know. It's just kind of a weird one.
That is weird, yeah.
All right, that brings us to Alan Jouban, Niko Price.
Hey.
This is a weird fight. Jouban seems to have slotted into this role that the UFC seems to hold for a few fighters. I don't really know what it is that makes this happen. It's the same role that Juliana Lima has at strawweight. It's the same role that I think for a while Joe Lozon has at lightweight. And it's this role where you either fight absolute top of the division killers, or you fight guys that are just starting out in the UFC and have almost no hope of beating you. And those are the only two fights you get. You either get a top 5 guy who needs an action fight and is coming off a loss, or you get the new kid who is just trying to figure out how MMA works at an elite level and is not ready to face you at all. And Niko Price is the latter. He is big and powerful, but his offense is really unstructured. He does a lot of just kind of waiting and looking and trying to find the right opportunities to throw power shots. And in the meantime, he eats a lot of shots. He was pretty clearly losing to Alex Moreno before he knocked Moreno clean the hell out. And Moreno is a dude, every fight I remember going into that fight, my read on it was Alex Moreno should probably lose this fight because he's an unstructured mess who's not nearly as good an athlete as he fights like he is. But he always seems to win, and I don't think that Price is going to be the guy to make him pay for it. And then Price was. Price was able to turn that into a knockout and, make Moreno pay for leading combinations with his face, with both arms stretched out. And That's not Jouban, though. Jouban is a very competent kicker at range. He knows how to keep fights at the distance he wants. He knows how to be measured. He's tough. He knows, he's not the best boxer, but he knows how to pick his shots outside. He leads with kicks a lot to keep the distance to where he wants. And Price is just not active enough to force a fight on Alan Jouban, I don't think. I think he's not fast enough. He can hit hard, so if Jouban gets wild, gets over aggressive, there's a chance that Price can catch him. But I don't trust Niko Price to get like just another in a series of miracle knockouts. To Price's credit, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 KOs. He would have 7, but because he failed his drug test for marijuana against Moreno,
oh no,
overturned that one.
The devil's lettuce.
I know. So, and he's a decent grappler. He was able to submit Brandon Thatch. He showed some ability there, but Jouban's a good grappler too. Jouban's not an easy guy to submit, even if Gunnar Nelson just wrapped him up. That's Gunnar Nelson, and
that's elite level. You can't fault anyone for that.
Yeah, I don't trust Jouban. I don't trust Price to be able to do anything more than potentially catch Jouban at the end of something. And otherwise, I think Jouban's going to be pretty clearly taking rounds.
Yeah, well, I do think that Niko Price is definitely the far better athlete of the two. Well, not far better, but he's a more dynamic athlete of the two. He's got more of a spring, like just right out the box type thing for certain spurts of the fight. I don't think he's going to be able to do that sort of thing at a consistent pace throughout the entire bout. So this is where I do get a bit worried, because Jouban is a very composed and competent, much more complete fighter as well. Decent striker, good with a submission defense. He can wrestle a bit. And he's got the game down, but it comes down to what kind of decisions he makes and what his limitations end up being, as far as whether or not he has the power to put somebody down, or working things from there. So I kind of have to. You know what? I'm actually going to go for the wily upset here. I think Price might have some tricks up his sleeve with his striking to actually put him down, or at least hurt him enough to end up getting a decision here.
All right, you're taking Price to get the knockout, or to change the fight enough with his power to take over the fight.
I think so.
To date, Chidi Njokuani knocked Jouban out with a body kick in his second pro fight. Tumanov, the only other guy to knock Jouban out.
Yeah, I remember that one. That was rough.
Yeah, and Jouban did fight Mike Perry, so it's not like he hasn't faced other heavy hitters. Odds on this fight, let's see. Jouban is the favorite, opening at -185 and slowly trending upward to downward, I guess you could say. I don't know. It's an upward line on the graph to -162. Now recently dropping back to -169. So a little up and down movement as that line has slowly gotten closer on Jouban. Price opening at +145, dropping down to +135, and since going up and down, now at +141. I'm a little surprised that those lines have been getting closer, frankly. I mean, you're picking him, but Jouban has a much longer track record of success than Price at the upper levels of the welterweight division. Price,
But I'm wondering if Jouban is starting to slide a bit. I don't know. He's been at this for a bit. He's 35. I don't know, dude.
Yeah, he's 35. He's only 6 years into his career. He's not like he's not a battle veteran in terms of that kind of thing. But he's also been in some wars lately. He took a bunch of punishment from Mike Perry. He took a bunch of punishment from Bilal Muhammad. So he's definitely got some wear on him. Price might be, Price is big and powerful. He might be the next guy he might be the first guy to start putting coffin nails in Jouban's career, if that's your read on it. Let's see. Altitude-wise, Jouban apparently has been out fight week, but did his camp at Big Bear. And Price apparently has been out 2 weeks ahead of fight week, but not confirmed, reportedly. So that brings us to the co-main event now. Women's strawweight bout, Randa Markos, Alexa Grasso, and let's see. This is you.
Okay, well, you know what? I'm seeing Markos definitely having the wrestling advantage against pretty much anyone in this division at this point. I mean, she was able to out-wrestle Carla Esparza for some parts of that fight. I just don't know how she's going to be able to get this off against Grasso. I mean, this is probably going to be one of the better tests for her when it comes to her ground game. We saw her take on Felice Herrig, who was, not that much larger, but, somewhat heavier, was able to cut off angles and capitalize on some of the mistakes that Grasso's still making in her game. So I don't know. I don't know if she's been able to close up enough, but I do think that Grasso's striking is at least good enough to keep Markos at bay. Not only that, but also to counter her wrestling, at least keep her with the pot shots and then see where she's going with the takedowns and time that right. So I kind of don't. The problem I have with this is Markos her game is so tied to her wrestling that I don't really see her having that many backups, whereas Grasso is able to at least set up some traps off her back, and she definitely has far better striking. So I mean, you got to get the fight down there first, and then once you're there, it's not going to be easy. So we can either have a pretty fun striking exhibition from Grasso, or we could just have an ugly slog where nobody looks good because they're just going to be tussling on the ground, and they're going to cancel each other out with Markos's defense and Grasso's attempts. Still, that said, I'm going to go with Alexa on this one. I just can't go against her.
I mean, there's a lot of hype on Grasso, so I get why. But I kind of feel like the UFC is just setting her up to replay her Felice Herrig fight.
No.
Because it's not like Herrig. I mean, Herrig has shown some recent strides in her kickboxing. And I know she's got a kickboxing background, but Herrig has never been the stalwart for great technical striking at strawweight. She's been a pretty low-powered, somewhat wooden striker who's not at her best coming forward. She's not bad. She's got a good chin. She throws volume. She's willing to wade in. But those are all things that can be said about Randa Markos too. And the big thing I think I've seen out of Grasso and who's her fellow?
It's oh God, how could I forget her name now? Her teammate. Oh,
out of Lobo Gym, who fought Leslie Smith. I can just.
Yeah, no, I'm looking up Lobo now. It's Lorena something? No. Yeah, Irene Aldana.
Irene Aldana. The thing that I've seen out of both of them is that their style of boxing and their style, the way they've been built and their style of striking, it's not really made to fight somebody who won't go away. Against people who are willing to pressure them and come forward that they can't hit or that they can't outmuscle, people who aren't smaller than them, well smaller than them, like Mizuki Inoue. They end up, Grasso just backed herself into the fence over and over again against Felice Herrig and sort of trapped herself and shut down her own potential to create diverse offense. They're not good at fighting off their back foot. They're not good at taking over momentum of a fight if they've lost momentum. And that is a problem against Markos. Because Markos, for her faults, she tends to, she throws a lot of stuff that isn't very well set up. Her striking isn't as sharp as she wants it to be. She's kind of developed. I mean, she's come along. She's definitely working on it. her footwork gets a little overeager, especially when she's coming forward. She kind of gets herself off balance. She likes to have this really like hunched forward, low, long jab style where she's trying to like hide her shots and things like that. And it's not always as effective as it should be, but she's also like, I can't remember her ever being hurt in a fight or ever being backed off. Like, she can be sort of, you know, you can move around her and outpoint her and sort of fend her off and make her just sort of come at you with sloppy shots. But I just don't see anything about Alexa Grasso's style that's made to handle that. She's made to take people where if she lands a good, clean shot, they're going to back off and give her space and let her reset and let her get more time to like pick up and pick the shots she wants and pot shot. And I just, you know, the thing in the Felice Herrig fight was Herrig didn't get hurt, is hard to hurt too, has a great chin, and just wouldn't back off of her, wouldn't let her take command of the pace of the fight. And if she can't do that, I don't think she's winning. So, and you know, coupled with the fact that Randa Markos is really hard to submit, has only lost, she was been submitted by Courtney Casey, but has otherwise been tough to submit. I don't think that, I don't trust Grasso to just like lock up a submission off her back, even though that's something I know she's capable of. Grasso, for all of her wily guard play, has never submitted anyone. You know?
No, I mean, it's more a functional thing to get herself out of a bind. I mean,
Yeah.
She's never really been able to accomplish that, not in MMA at least.
So if Markos is willing to test that and just go to the ground with her and say, okay, let's test and see if you're actually able to submit me, I don't have as much faith that Markos can, or that Grasso can get the submission as I do Markos can just stay on her and create offense. So I'm picking Randa Markos here, and I kind of feel like the UFC is just they're kind of wasting Grasso by throwing her at two pretty seasoned veterans with, you know, big, tough, seasoned strawweight vets that are gatekeepers in the division for a 23-year-old who, you know, came out as a hot prospect, but clearly needs more seasoning.
No.
Grasso is currently the favorite, however, opening at -170, going up to -143, and dropping back down to -159. So little up and down action there, but lately more people putting money on her than Markos. Markos opening at +130, dropping all the way to +118. Now back up to +132. So I don't really, after seeing the fight Grasso put up with Herrig, I have trouble looking at her as a favorite in this fight.
No.
Like, she just clearly got outworked by Felice Herrig in a kickboxing fight, and that's not that doesn't tend to be the way that Felice Herrig wins fights.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, but I mean, there's so many other factors as far as Herrig's improvements and, you know, between her previous fight and that one. So, I mean, I don't know. That's a weird one.
That brings us to our main event. Oh, and let's see. Altitude, Grasso, 1 to 2 days, but trains at a mile up. So that's something. And Markos is only coming out for fight week. So,
well,
there is that. That could be a big problem for Markos, who otherwise is training up around Michigan, and Michigan, not a very mountainous place. And Markos has also had trouble with like fight camp finances before. Like, she doesn't, having the money to train at big camps and stuff like that. She's gone on to smaller places that are working for her, but that may be the reason that she's not out there longer training at altitude for a fight at altitude. So
yeah, I do remember her going back to Michigan top team after TriStar. So that might be, I don't know.
So that is worth looking at for this fight. I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in Grasso picking up big wins against veterans after that Herrig fight. like making big jumps. I feel like she's going to be more of a talent that shows up like 4 years from now, where through patient building over years and years of fighting, you're going to be suddenly like, oh yeah, here's where all that talent was. Like Amanda Nunes, you know, people were talking like Amanda Nunes, stellar star back in her Strikeforce days. Like, oh, this woman's going to be it. And then
it took her a while. It took her a while to get to that.
A long time. Now she's the shit. Now she's champ. But, you know, it took her losing some ugly fights to get there.
Yeah.
That brings us to a flyweight bout now. Sergio Pettis, Brandon Moreno. I like this fight a lot. I'm glad, you know, this is not going to be a great card technically. I don't think. There's a lot, even at the top, with Niko Price, Alexa Grasso, Martin Bravo, Humberto Bandenay, Alejandro, you know, Perez, Soukhamthath. Like, there are a lot of sloppy, potentially really sloppy fights at the top of this card.
Yeah.
Pettis Moreno is a great main card bout. I'm still not sure about it as a headlining bout.
Well, I mean, that's what these cards are designed it's with that express purpose, you know.
Yeah, it's
and we've talked about this at length for that.
In regards to recent other Fox Sports 1 cards, this is especially just like there are a lot of dudes who are really raw on this card, and the main event being a couple of guys who might contend someday for a flyweight title shot, but are not like currently on the fast track to title contention. It's like, you know, Moreno maybe in a year or two, Pettis maybe in a year or two, but I'm not looking at them as like, if Moreno wins this fight, he should be fighting Demetrius Johnson tomorrow, you know?
No.
Big thing. This is an interesting fight. It's a fight I'm really excited to see because I think that Sergio Pettis is an exceptionally tough matchup for Brandon Moreno. Pettis has gotten some shit basically for not being his brother. People want, like, you know, people see Anthony Pettis out there, and this was especially because he came in like right when Pettis was like peak Pettis, and Pettis was on the Wheaties box and all that, and then you got Sergio coming in there, and everybody's like, oh man, Sergio's even better than Anthony. That's what they're saying. That's what the hype is. And he gets submitted by Alex Caceres. And then a couple fights after that, he gets knocked out by Ryan Benoit. And everybody's like, this dude ain't shit. I don't care anymore. And it's the problem. Like, it's kind of your Ryan Bader syndrome, where when you watch a guy lose a few key fights that he was supposed to win, there's a prospect coming up, suddenly nobody cares how good you get.
Yeah.
And I think to Sergio Pettis' credit, especially, you know, by the time he got to that John Moraga fight, he's become a much better fighter. The big thing being that he's become a much more controlled defensive fighter than he used to be. The big problem he used to have, the big thing that cost him, especially in his Benoit fight, but also in his Caceres fight, is that he had this sort of swagger about him that basically said, like, I don't need defense that much. Like, you can't hurt me. You're not really in this fight with me. I'm going to be out there controlling the pace, controlling the tempo. I don't really care what you do. I've got everything that I need here to win. And then, you know, he'd be doing all right in a fight. He'd be beating Ryan Benoit, and then Benoit would just catch him because he was getting sloppy. Like, he's getting complacent.
Yeah.
And he's stopped getting complacent. I think he's learned from those fights, and he's become a more defensively sound striker. And when he's a more defensively sound fighter, Pettis is a very, very good wrestler, a very good grappler, and a very solid, like, nuts and bolts fundamentals striker who works well. And Moreno, he's kind of the opposite, where he's all high-octane flash. You know, he'll be just, like, charging at people with, like, here's a flying knee and 3 punches behind it. here, okay, let's go to the ground, and here's a mad scramble where I'm just going to, like, search for the back as quickly as possible and try and choke you out, and then we'll get caught up deeper in a scramble because I'll lose position, and we'll go back and forth for 5 minutes, but I'll never stop, and because I never stop, you'll quit first and I'll win. And I mean, even in that big win he picked up over Dustin Ortiz, Ortiz just pushed him against the cage, took him down, controlled him. And Moreno is, you know, he's got a great gas tank. He doesn't go away. Ortiz faded like a half step, and suddenly Moreno's, you know, wild high-octane offense was there to catch him with something, jump on his back, and submit him. I think that Pettis is a little too controlled for that. I think he's a little, you know, he's a more fundamentally technically sound, defensively safe fighter than Dustin Ortiz. And he's a smoother, more technical fighter in general than Dustin Ortiz. Like, Ortiz is kind of like, you know, he's also been a motor guy. He's been the guy where, like, you know, he wants to get in those scramble-filled fights with Ray Borg and Justin Scoggins where he can show that he's the guy who pushes harder and he's the guy who will keep reversing positions and win scrambles. Whereas Pettis is, you know, he gets positions, he takes you down, he works his grappling game, and he's much more like, I'm going to lock you down. I'm going to work these solid positions, and I'm going to make you pay for them, and I'm going to be the technically perfect guy that makes you pay for all the mistakes in your game. And I still don't have enough faith in Moreno's wild, high-octane offense against really well put-together, good top-level fighters to pick him to knock Pettis out. He could. Pettis has been knocked out before. He's been submitted before. Moreno could be the next guy to just catch him getting complacent, catch him getting lazy. But I'm picking Pettis to get takedowns, control positions, stay safe, land his shots, work his game.
Okay, quick primer on this here. Brandon Moreno came in off of the Ultimate Fighter where he lost the very first fight that he was in that flyweight season. Before the season even concluded, he gets called up to be a late replacement to fight Louis Smolka, where he was replacing Sergio Pettis. Ends up shocking a lot of people. Gets that beautiful submission, brutal against Louis Smolka. Ends up winning a split decision against Ryan Benoit, and then he ends up submitting Dustin Ortiz. Here's another situation of a guy who wasn't supposed to make it, but somehow he just did. And whatever it is the things that he's doing work. It's a wily style. It's somewhat disparate. It's not as organized, but it's functional. I mean, he'll go for a wild kick, and while you're doing this, he's got a body lock. And then that's all he needs is that brief window of opportunity. And I don't know. I just, as great a striker as Sergio Pettis can be, as great as he's gotten from his time on the regional circuit and during his few fights in the UFC, I don't know that that's going to be enough, man. I think that when it comes to that grappling defense, I just think that Moreno's going to just be tricky enough to get close and hug him. And if he can do that, that's gonna kind of be it, man. I mean, he doesn't have to shoot in with a wrestling takedown. He can just start working body lock, head and arm throws, whatever. I mean, he's gonna be able to get this to the ground whether Pettis likes it or not, and he's not gonna want that. So once he starts working from there and using his fundamentals, using his pressure from up top, and just systemically breaking the guy down and sneaking down to grab an arm or something, he's gonna prefer the choke most likely. I don't know, man. I'm just having visions of Pettis not really doing well at the submission defense. Not well enough, I should say. Because, again, I don't want to sell Pettis short on this. I don't want this to look like he can't grapple because he's got both of them, both him and his brother do have great grappling chops. But the thing is, man, this is a pretty elite grappler that we're seeing right now. Probably the best submission guy in that division outside of the champion at this point if he keeps going in this direction. So, I don't know, man. I got to pick Moreno on this.
Yeah, I mean, Pettis' takedown defense has never been rock solid. Like this, it's good, but he's never been rock solid. He's been taken down in each of his fights at least once in the UFC. So there's an argument there for that. It's also worth noting Pettis, as of August 1st, so as of 2 days ago, had been out in Mexico City for 4 days. So he'll be out. He will only have been out there really for fight week, a little longer, and maybe a little longer. It says at least 4 days, so it could be could be longer than that, but maybe not a lot longer than that.
Yeah,
and Moreno has been out there at least 17 days.
Yeah, good luck with that shit. There we go, kids.
Yeah, that's gonna make it harder on Pettis in a scrambling flyweight fight with somebody who is really known for pushing a hard pace.
And he's lanky and he's heavy and he's gonna make you carry that weight. Good luck with that.
I hate it. I hate this whole elevation thing because that just
it throws so many variables into this that we shouldn't really have to account for. I know.
I'm making my picks based mostly not on elevation because I want to be reasonable to like being being technical with how I see the fight matching up. But shit, that's hard. It makes it hard.
Well, I, on the other hand, couldn't give any less of a fuck about my picks.
I know.
And it shows.
It makes it hard to pick Pettis and Markos, and it makes it hard to pick ask questions of Bravo and let's see, Scott fight week came out, Dustin Ortiz fight week, Sanchez 3 days, Rinaldi fight week, like guys that have not been out there for that long. It asks some heavy questions that I hate to have to. I hate to try and answer that. So
yeah.
All right. On that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up. You can find. Oh wait, no, we need odds on that. Wow, that surprises me. Sergio Pettis opened at plus 110, now up at plus 143. And Brandon Moreno opened at minus 150, now down to minus 173. So that hype on Brandon Moreno is real.
Yeah. May
also be a help to Pettis. Not much of one, though, probably. That, well, no, because especially if Dustin Ortiz is no longer at Rufus Sport, I was going to say, having Ortiz be able to be like, I just fought this guy, here's some things to watch for. But if Ortiz isn't at Rufus Sport, then that's not a big help. And Ortiz mostly held him down for a round and then got cracked and submitted. So I don't know how much you could really say.
Well, he did train some with Izzy Martinez, but I mean, Brandon Moreno's style isn't so much a wrestling-based approach. So I don't know, probably might help him get out of some control positions, but I don't know. He's tricky, dude. He's tricky.
We'll see. All right. On that note, you can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. You can find Vic on Twitter at VicMRodriguez. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com. Give us a like on YouTube. That's the thumbs up thing down there. That helps us a lot. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, MMANation.com, DOTCON. Let's get all the latest Bloody Elbow shows, videos, news, analysis, all that good stuff we do week in, week out. We will be back not next week, but on September 2nd. So basically a month from now for UFC Rotterdam, Struve versus Volkov. In the meantime, I will probably be running MMA Depressed Us every week, and we'll still have If I Did It and Knuckle Up and Heavy Hands and all that good stuff we do week in, week out. And we'll probably have a few vivisections for some Bellator, PFL, Ryzen, whatever else is going on out there.
Invicta this month.
So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next time.